Hello, hello. Welcome to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. I'm so grateful that you're joining us yet again for another great episode. And Merry Christmas. 1 week from the release of this podcast is Christmas Day. And we're grateful that maybe you're on your drive right now to your Christmas festivities. Maybe you're kind of settling in. Maybe there's some fresh fallen snow. Maybe there is a fire in the fireplace and you've got some hot cocoa or some coffee, some eggnog. I almost feel like, you remember Delilah back in the day? I just had a moment where I feel like I'm being Delilah as I'm inviting you to settle in. Got to snap out of that one. Listen, we're so grateful that you're here joining us. You know, every year around this time, I'm reminded that a couple of things, especially with the nature of this community. I'm reminded that the calendar doesn't care what kind of season your soul is in. You see, for most of us, the lights are going up, the music is turning on, the commercials are telling us it's the most wonderful time of the year. And yet, for so many of us, Christmas is where our grief feels the loudest. If you've read Nothing is Wasted, the book, you know there's a scene where, it was only a month or so, a little bit more than a month after Amanda passed away, that we're celebrating Christmas. And I was just lost. We didn't feel like decorating. We didn't feel like doing any kind of celebration. So I get it. Maybe this is your first Christmas without someone you love. Maybe it's been years, but you still feel that gnawing ache when you unpack the decorations or when you set the table, you see the empty chair. Maybe you look around at all the celebration and think, how am I supposed to sing about joy when my heart feels this heavy? I get it. If that's you, I really believe today's conversation is going to feel like a gentle companion, an empathetic witness, if you will. Today, I'm talking with Lanier Ivester. Lanier is an author who studied English literature at Oxford. So I could listen to her for years, right by the fire with a cup of coffee. And so I think this is going to bless you. But she and her husband, Philip, live on a small farm just outside of Atlanta. In his childhood home, the historic Rough House. Their life's full of animals and gardens and hospitality. And if you're listening to this right now, you're probably hearing one of my animals bark in the background. Hopefully it's not picking up on the mic, but he is barking incessantly, our little long-haired miniature dachshund, Henry. And I'm not going to stop the recording because I've been recording for too long. So bear with me. She's got goats and chickens and dogs. And at one point, a beloved peacock named, it was called Penev or something, who used to come to the back door every morning looking for her. So this, all pun intended, this gave she and I fodder for common ground to talk about our little hobby farms. Lanier's book that she released last Christmas, we wanted to bring her on right at this time because it's such a great resource. It's called Glad and Golden Hours, a companion for Advent and Christmastide. And I'm telling you, it is such a unique resource. Much of her life, it's this beautiful tapestry, part memoir, part cookbook, part liturgical guide. I'm telling you, it is sacred and unique, but it's not the Christmas book that she set out to write. And as she tells us, she thought she was writing a charming little book about traditions and recipes, and then a wave of grief hit. Just like for many of us, we plan out our ways, and then things don't go the way we planned. In the middle of her writing, Lanier lost her mom. Not long after that, her mother-in-law died, then her father-in-law, then a beloved nephew. On top of all of that, she and Philip had already walked through a devastating house fire that nearly destroyed their historic 1850s farmhouse, forcing them to live in a camper in the yard for a year. So when Lanier talks about Christmas and grief, she's certainly not speaking theoretically. She's sorted through her childhood home. She's stood in front of spice cabinets and dining room tables that held decades of family memories. And she has asked God, how do I walk through this without completely shutting down? There's a line in this conversation that I don't think I know I won't ever forget. She says that when we try to protect ourselves from sorrow, we also end up protecting ourselves from joy. My counselor said it this way: you can't selectively numb. The same places in your heart that feel the grief are the places that will one day feel joy and purpose again. It's the same sensors, the same synapses. Lanier shares a powerful picture that God gave her of herself as an armadillo curled up tight, armored against any more pain, and how the Lord gently invited her to stay open with him, even in the hurt. She talks about Advent is the season that actually makes space for that kind of honest sorrow. And then about Christmastide, the 12-day feast on the other side, is a season that makes space for joy, not joy instead of grief, but joy right in the face of it. And as she tells Christmas stories about long-held family traditions, about the brunch they host every Christmas, about the year they had to cancel it because they were living in a camper, and how the kids asked if they could at least come play in the yard, she reminds us that our traditions are meant to serve our relationships and not the other way around. And that's where this ties beautifully into something that's happening across Nothing is Wasted this month. Because we're witnessing right now stories being shared, just like you would share stories around a dinner table, a Christmas table. I remember every Christmas we would get around the living room and with our extended family, we would share stories of God's faithfulness, how maybe hard this year had been, and yet how we had seen God show up. And my parents are in tears and I'm crying. I didn't realize, like, I'd come by and honestly, I just cry all the time because my parents just cry at the drop of a hat. I've witnessed that every year, watching them just tears of joy, tears of sorrow, tears shed over reflecting on the faithfulness of God. And right now we're in the middle of this Legacy of Hope campaign where we're sharing stories of hope, stories of people being strengthened because someone else dared to share their story. And that's what this podcast is all about. That's what this campaign, this end of the year giving campaign, is really all about. It's a celebration of how God has used these stories in tremendous ways and how we're trusting in God to increase the impact of these stories. There's a few folks who have written in recently on the podcast reviews. If you want to go rate and review the podcast, I'd love for you to do that on Apple Podcasts. It's really helpful to hear these things, but just listen to this. One person said, "This podcast is my lifeline in all seasons, particularly my impossible. In my weakness, our God is strong." And Davy's words echo in my mind to point me back to Jesus time and time again. Such a great testimony there. When we received that, I just sat with it. And it's not because of a podcast, it's because God uses stories to call us back to himself. In fact, I always pray before an interview. I say, God, you alone can intuit what the person who's listening to this or watching this, what they're going through. And so would you guide our conversation to meet them exactly the place that they need to be met right now? And that's what I believe. I believe right now this is meeting you in the place that you need to be met. You can have hope in that God is a personal God. We had another listener who wrote in, as a mother who has had her own journey of grief and loss of a daughter, a miscarriage, and a divorce, this podcast has been so encouraging and helps me continue trusting Jesus and living with hope. Yet another one, this one from a licensed psychotherapist, says, "This is a wonderful resource that provides encouragement, wise counsel, and points its listeners to the one who sees and cares for you no matter how dark your journey may be." You guys, these are not just podcast reviews. They're testimonies of lives being steadied, strengthened, their faith being revived, and hearts that are finding breath again because hope was shared. That's why we created the Hope in the Valley devotional, because every page is shaped by real stories of real suffering and yet also by real healing. And not only did this devotional release this month, but this month, as a part of the Legacy of Hope campaign, every gift that you give, every dollar amount that you give is being doubled up to $50,000 thanks to a group of people that we have known as our Cornerstone partners. That's right. We have a $50,000 match. And if you give $100 or more in this campaign, we will send you a Hope in the Valley devotional just to say thank you. And we're not here to pressure you. This is no like hard ask, but we're just simply inviting you to join what God's already doing. Help us to put fuel on this fire. Help us to accelerate the vision that God has given us as a ministry to continue to reach more and more people, not just with this podcast, but with our coaching, with our Pain to Purpose course, our Pain to Purpose course, our church partnerships, all of the things that we're doing as a ministry where we're ministering to, training people, and helping people as they're navigating their valley. You can go to nothingiswasted.com/legacy of hope, and you can see where your gifts go to. You can see everything about this campaign to see, okay, what am I giving to? And what is this actually doing? How's this impacting the ministry? And ultimately what and who the ministry touches? So I'd invite you to do that. nothingiswaste.com/legacy of hope. So as we step into today's conversation with Lanier Ivester, I want you to hold on to this truth. God wastes nothing. He doesn't waste your grief. He doesn't waste your waiting. He doesn't waste your longing. He doesn't waste your story. Hope is moving. Healing is multiplying. And the same God who met Lanier in her dark moments is the God who's walking with you right now. Well, Lanier, it's so great to have you on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me. It's an honor and a joy.
Well, I always love having someone from the South on because, as I told you, I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. And so it's always so great to hear the sweet Southern accents and to reminisce about the beautiful Southeast.
Well, and people tease me, I'm from Atlanta, and Atlanta is probably one of the most homogenized cities in the South. And even though I have lived here all my life, I'm like a fourth generation Atlanta native. My husband and I both our accents have kind of lost a little of their dulcet tones.
Well, I'm telling you, I can hear it a little bit. I'm picking up on it right now, just a little bit of the drawl. So I love it. It's nothing like the Midwest where we literally have zero regional diction at all. So, Lanier, why don't you tell us a little bit about your life? You have a fascinating life. Tell us a little bit about just kind of what does life look like for you right now? And then I want to dive into your story. I want to dive into this book, this resource, which is just so, so beautiful. But tell us about what things are like for you right now.
Yeah. Well, I live a pretty quiet life. My husband and I live on a small farm, which is something of an anomaly in this part of the world. On the fringe of the metro, people don't really know we're here and pull down the driveway and like, oh, it's like a little pocket of a rural oasis. But we actually live in the home place where my husband grew up. So we have a lot of history here. So both of us are, again, Atlanta natives, and I'm a writer. I have been writing since I was 8 years old. And so we just, I spend my days writing, tending the garden, caring for our holding of farm animals and managing our dogs. And also a huge part of our lives is hospitality. And that is a calling that my husband, Philip, and I both share and greatly value. So I do spend a lot of my time just loving on guests. So.
I love it. So I'm very curious because I told you that we share a little bit of that in common on kind of hobby farm, small farm, whatever scale you want to talk about it, right? We also have goats and chickens and all that. We do not have some of the eclectic array that you have in terms of ducks and peacocks. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, yes. And sadly, my peacock died last year. So we keep saying we're going to get another one. We had two, and Panov was just my pet. Like, he would literally come to the back door, look in the French doors, like looking for me every morning. I would come out with whatever offerings I had to give him. Anyone who says that peacocks just are, have bad attitudes, I would beg to differ. Like, he was just my darling. And fortunately, awesome. Our neighbors, we have very long-suffering neighbors, and they grew to appreciate his nightly screams and miss them or gone. So,
I'm curious.
Like to think about life without peacocks, though.
I know. Well, it's fitting. You're on the Nothing is Wasted podcast, so we can even talk a little bit about the grief of what was his name? What'd you say?
His name was Panov. Panav, and he had a brother named Average.
Oh, man. Well, they're beautiful creatures. I am curious because my wife and I have different philosophies. I study a lot of the permaculture, so I'm trying to figure out how everything on our farm has some kind of functionality, like practical functionality. My wife just loves the animals and the aesthetic and the beauty of it and the pets, even if they're very impractical. Is there any practical use for peacocks on a farm?
Well, I mean, they do keep predators away. Okay. Like, I noticed a big uptick in predation on my chickens. Yeah. And they don't realize that they're doing it. I think they're just big and blue
Yeah.
and noisy and, yeah, but supposedly their manure is really, really good for gardens. So
Well,
it's
look
good
at
for
that.
flowers. I've
There you
never
go.
tried it.
Peacock permaculture right there from Lanier. You heard it here first on the Nothing is Wasted podcast, guys. I love it. I love it. Well, Lanier, you last year released a book called Glad in Golden Hours, which is a companion for Advent and Christmastide. And we are releasing this right now, right around Christmas time, so that people can take a peek. So I know it's been a year that since you've released this, but I wanted to make sure that our community got this resource into their hands this Christmas time because it is it's beautiful. It's unique. It's part memoir, part cookbook, part liturgical guide. Like it has very, almost like your farm, a picture of this eclectic, putting some things together, but they really fit well. And specifically around the topic of grief, because in the ministry that we work with people all the time who are walking through trauma, tragedy, major life transition, and it seems that around the holidays there is at least an enhanced awareness of the grief. Sometimes it even seems like many people's tragedies take place right before the holidays. I know that was the case for me. My wife was killed in November of 2015, and so I remember the first Christmas without her. And I remember my 15-month-old son opening up a present that she had got for him that was so that just an agonizing, you don't even want to celebrate. It's just so, but that is not just the story for the first Christmas for a lot of people. It's for many Christmases moving forward into everything changes. So I'm curious, what was the motivation behind this, putting this together? You said this was not the book that you ever wanted to write. So why did you write it?
Well, and it's not the book that I set out to write. When we first embarked on this project, and one thing I really feel like is important to acknowledge is that this book was very much a collaborative effort. The illustrator, Jennifer Trafton, is also one of my very best friends.
Oh, wow.
And so she knows my story. She has walked with me through so many of the stories that I recount in this book. And so Jennifer and I hatched the idea for this book in December of 2020, which I know many people will remember was the strangest and loneliest Christmas we collectively probably have had in our generation. And Jennifer was really asking me, like, what, she was observing the fact that I was still going through a lot of the motions of my traditions and preparing food and decorating the house and different things that I would do, even though it was just such a different year. And the more we talked about it, the more she kept drawing out the why behind the significance attached to these various practices and traditions. And we were just chatting about it over my breakfast table one morning, and I said, hey, look, if I write a cookbook, will you illustrate it? Because she not only is a very gifted author, she is an artist and illustrator. And she said yes before I'd even finished asking the question. But what I didn't realize is when we started working on this project, I said, I think I'll throw some essays in, some stories to kind of give context to some of these practices and traditions and recipes. And every time I would send her what I'd written, she would say, yeah, but let's pull on this thread. Like, the real depth of the story is the sorrows and the griefs and the losses that you have seen and that God has brought you through. And she's like, that's what people are going to identify with. And of course I knew that she was right. And so I really started opening a vein, in a way that I hadn't prepared to in a Christmas book. Wow. But the reality is, as you've already said, Davey, Christmas really can and often does make the hard things in our lives even harder. And there's so many cultural expectations that have just really been built on to this time of year. In addition to the fact that as Christians, we have a legitimate joy, like God is with us, like we're celebrating, the birthday of God's fulfilled promise in the flesh. And so that can just feel, very incongruent with our circumstances, many times. And so anyway, it just, it was really born out of that tension. And then to even deepen the story of behind the story of the book, when I was halfway through writing this book and really already starting to tease out some of these motifs and themes of sorrow and joy and grief and hope, my mother died. And I had to take almost a year off writing the book, in terms, caring for her, and then the grief and the funeral, and then emptying my childhood home that my family had lived in for 40 years and preparing that to be sold, and then selling the house. So it was just like this real pile on. And in the middle of that, my mother-in-law died 6 weeks after my mother. My father-in-law died 9 months later. We lost our nephew a few months after that to cancer. And so, it was just like this milieu of grief that we were just wading through. And so when I finally came back to the manuscript after being away for almost a year, I realized, that not only is this not the book I set out to write 2 years ago, this is not the book I was working on, before my mother died. Right. And the beauty of it is that when I look back over the manuscript and what I'd already written, I realized, oh my goodness, this is my mother's book. She's all over it. And I didn't even realize that. And so being able to, pick up the manuscript again, carrying this new grief, it was so healing to walk through the rest of that year, really in company with my mother, and to realize, yes, this is her book, and I get to spend this year honoring her and processing my grief in a really creative and cathartic way. So long answer, but
it's beautiful. That was amazing. And I can't imagine the back-to-back nature of experiencing these losses. Whether it feels like it's in the natural way, the natural order of things, that instead of a parent burying their child, a child burying their parent, whether it's young, old, it doesn't matter. Loss is loss, and it feels excruciating because it's never a good timing. It's just, you don't expect it. Even if you feel like you're anticipating and expecting, no matter how it's done, you are sitting with the reality of an empty seat now. And all of these memories now being brought to the surface, especially as you're emptying out the house that you grew up in. And what was that like for you specifically when it came to remembering traditions of the holidays and the things that you guys did there? And how was that process both difficult and maybe healing for you to just specifically go into the house and begin to sort through your childhood home and sort through your mother's things and all of that? What was that like?
Oh, well, it was excruciatingly tender. It was also deeply, deeply rewarding and joyful, because as daunting as the task was, I really felt like an archaeologist in a lot of ways, because I was just going through layer after layer. I mean, 40 years of life deeply lived in this house. Even as I was processing and emptying the rooms, I just used this as an occasion to pray for the people who would come after us, that some memory of God's incredible faithfulness would stay in that place and bless the people to come. Because my parents both, and I lost my dad 10 years ago, but my parents were just extraordinary people. They did not come to Christ until I was 12. And so I really was able to see the difference that Jesus made in their lives, in their marriage, in our home, in a really, really profound way. And so, as I said, like, I really felt like the very walls of that house were haunted with the memory of God's faithfulness. And so it was really good for me to go back and just kind of scrape away some of the layers of more recent sadness and sorrow, the death of my dad and then my mother's illness and, just years that the story of our home had kind of been a little overshadowed. Well, not a little, had been overshadowed by sorrow.
Yeah.
And, it was just the most unexpected things just really pierced my heart. Like cleaning up my mother's spice cabinet was probably the hardest thing I did because it was so representative of her and like all the ways that she nourished us, not just our bodies, but our hearts and our souls with food and traditions. And so much of that was centered around our table. I mean, the table, my mother's dining room table was the absolute center, heart of our home. And so, yeah, that was a very, it reinforced for me, though, a lot of the things I'm trying to say that I was trying to say in Glad and Golden Hours about the importance of traditions and the way that we just really care for and just cultivate our family stories by way of really tactile means, scents and tastes, and all these things are just really powerful. And I think God gives us all of creation, to enjoy Him and also to bear witness to one another, His faithfulness. So
man, including peacocks.
Including peacocks. Absolutely, peacocks. They were a medieval symbol of the resurrection.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
You see them in a lot of medieval art, like particularly like over, sometimes you'll see them on gravestones, but they, the spread tail was very much a symbol of the resurrection. So
that's amazing. Lanier, as we're helping people navigate their own valley, we have kind of a phrase that we say often. It's a run toward the roar, which literally means the things that are quote unquote haunting you about the loss or the grief, the things that you are like, man, I don't, like you said, it's daunting, the task in front of me of sorting through all of these things, of going, whether it's like, I know this is practical, I know I have to do this, or if there isn't a practical nature to it, but there is something that is kind of there in the recesses of someone's heart that they don't want to confront, they don't want to deal with because it's just too excruciating. I'm curious what you would say to that person, especially when you look at it over the lens of your own grief journey. And as you said, how healing and cathartic it was, and excruciating it was to do that. What would you say to someone you're having coffee with right now and they're like, I just can't do it. I can't bring myself to go into their room. I can't bring myself to go to unpack the closet or to sort through things, or what would you say to that person?
Well, the first thing I would say is be super gentle with yourself. That's because God is so gentle with us. And so that's the first thing I would say. I would also say you don't have to do it by yourself. And even though I felt like I was alone many times in the journey of just, that specific journey of cleaning out my parents' home, God sent friends along when I needed them. And there were times that I knew I need to call somebody. I don't need to do this by myself. And sometimes it was a new friend from church who didn't know my parents, and sometimes it was someone who could just cry with me over old, beautiful memories. And so that, those two things. But I would also kind of digging down into just a little more of the heart level. One thing that I have learned over and over and over again through the different losses, great and small, that my husband and I have seen over the years, is that when we try to protect ourselves from the inroads of sorrow, when we try to shield our hearts and kind of pull up our defenses, we're basically protecting ourselves from joy. And that's no way to live. Like the more that we diminish our capacity to walk through grief, the more we diminish our capacity for joy. And, God is really inviting us to have a very holistic experience of both. That is the Christian narrative. We do not grieve as those who have no hope, but we do grieve and we do have hope. Yeah. And, in the face of death, that hope is really outrageous, like it's restoration. Like that is the secret that every Christian carries in their hearts. Like, as Tim Keller said, we're going to get it all back. It's Jesus is, he makes all things new. He will make all things new. And he's actually in the process of doing it now. So, So, I just a quick little story. I, just to kind of illustrate this, when my dad was in his, what turned out to be terminal illness, he was really, really going downhill. It was it's 10 years ago now. And my husband and I were kind of his primary caregivers, and it was excruciating, again, set of circumstances. But you were walking with him through that, and right in the middle of it, my dog died unexpectedly. And I was like, really, God? Like, how hard would that have been? And this dog, like, she was my heart dog. Like she was the kind of dog that like looked into my soul, and talked to me with her eyes. Like we all have dogs in life that like choose us. Mm-hmm. Like he was that dog. Mm-hmm. And, I found myself just, I couldn't even pray. Like I was so, at first I was like, am I mad at God? And I was like, no, I've been mad at God before. I'm not even mad at God. Like I'm afraid of God right now. Like, what is he going to do next? And it just felt that deep, and I know that, pain is not a contest. It's just pain. Right. But it just felt like too much, in that season. And one morning I was just sitting there, like pretending to have my devotions. And I just said that to God. I was like, you know what? I'm not mad at you, but I am afraid of you right now. And in that moment, one of the ways that God really, has spoken to me over the years. I'm a very visual person. And I can tell you a number of very specific times that he's just kind of brought a picture to my mind, that has given me real clarity on, what this heart of what I'm going through is, or what, just clarity on life, things that are happening between him and me or in the world around me. And at that moment, I just had this crystal clear image in my head of an armadillo, like curled up around itself. And I don't know, you're from the South. I don't know how widespread armadillos are in the United States. They've gotten a little invasive, but they're not attractive creatures at all. And when they get scared, they, unlike possums that play dead, like they roll themselves into a ball of like impervious armor to protect their underbelly, their most tender part. And God was like, that's you right now. Like you're protecting yourself from me. And when I realized that, and just, it was just one of those moments of, no, I have to open myself to this whole process, because that is where God shows me what he's like, who he really, really is. And that's not something that anybody else can do for you or even explain to you. It is very personal, but we have to stay open. And that's what he was just telling me, stay open.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I love that you said that when we diminish our capacity for grief, we're also diminishing our capacity for joy. My counselor said, you can't selectively numb.
Right. That's true.
If you're going to, the same pain, the same receptors that experience pain, grief, sorrow are the same ones that are also going to experience the joy that you hope to have one day, the excitement, the vigor for life again, the purpose that you feel. Those are and so if you numb one, you're going to, by virtue, you're going to numb the other one as well. And this is a pathway that God has invited us into. Scripture seems to tell us over and over this almost linear progression of, hey, if we're going to share in his resurrection, we first are sharing in his sufferings. If we really want to experience the resurrection of Jesus, we're going to be taking up our cross and experiencing his suffering as first.
Yes. And I love how it says in the Psalms, make me glad for as many days as I've seen
Mm,
affliction. And what that says to me is not that that's a formula, like, oh, I've been sad this many days and then God's going to make me happy this many days, but that it's a process,
yeah.
and that I've said elsewhere that like joy and sorrow are twin eggs of the same nest. Like we cannot, like you said, be selective.
Mm,
But one of my favorite books growing up was Hind's Feet on High Places. I don't know if you've
mm-hmm.
that it's an allegory, but
Yep.
the main character's name is Much Afraid, and I was like, oh, I can identify with her. And the story is basically her journey to the high places of just unbroken intimacy with the shepherd of her heart. But what she is completely unprepared for when she embarks on this journey is the fact that God, or her shepherd, in the book, in the story, sends two companions to help her on her way. And one is sorrow and one is suffering. And she's horrible. She's like, I don't want to go with them. But as she goes through the story, like, they are the ones that help her over all the hard places in life. They're the ones that, give her what she needs to keep going and, to pursue the real desire of her heart and intimacy with her Lord.
Wow. What a profound picture. That really brings to light the idea of suffering producing something, right? Producing perseverance, character, hope. It's actually sorrow and suffering that carries us through or empowers us to get through the hard places of life, that actually builds resilience. Isn't that the conversation these days? It's resilience. How do we build resilience? And it's almost like this idea of how do we build resilience so that we can get through suffering? And it's like, well, Scripture says it the opposite. It actually says that we build resilience through suffering. Mm-hmm. That's what builds our character.
Yeah. And, in the context of the holidays, just kind of bringing it back to Christmas, of course, Christmas is not, we've already acknowledged, is not immune from
right.
We don't get a break just because it's Christmas. And I think that, that all of the cultural hoopla can just really, that narrative can be just, a knife in our hearts. But one of the beautiful things that I have discovered along the way, and that really came to the surface in writing this book, was, as we're saying, like, sorrow is not the enemy of joy. They are not incompatible. But we have this beautiful image of that built in to the holiday season because we have Advent. And Advent is not just an extension of the Christmas season. It's not just more time to get stuff done. It is historically, traditionally been a time of penitence, of, just acknowledged waiting. And I love that because I feel like Advent just really gives us permission not to wallow, but to just really honor our grief, our loss, the things that we were waiting for, the things that may never be realized in this life. The Advent really, really makes space for that. And I want to encourage people to see it that way, that it is a chance to just really bring your broken hearts into the light of God's tender mercy. Because, one of my favorite verses in talking about the coming of Christ is in Luke, where he says, through the tender mercy of Zechariah is, prophesying that through the tender mercy of God, through the tender mercy, like, his light is breaking over our world. And so I have found from my experience that the more tender life grows, the more tender I see God to be to that.
Yeah.
And so, to just really cherish and savor this time as, just kind of entering into the great universal waiting for Messiah. I mean, because all the centuries before the incarnation of Christ, we're waiting for him to appear. Well, we're waiting for him to come back. and to make all things new and to restore all things. That we have this certain hope. But we're essentially, Advent is where we live, just kind of in our time in history and in the story of the church. And so it really does give us space to name our sorrows and to receive God's comfort. And then on the other side of that, Christmas makes room for our joy. And one of the things that I really wanted to challenge readers with is the idea of Advent and Christmastide. Like, Christmas isn't just a day; it's a season. And as Advent has traditionally been almost a little Lent, kind of a more somber season, that Christmas has been a 12-day feast. And we as Christians, we have the privilege of celebrating, not in spite of our sorrow, but in the face of it, because we know what's on the other side of it. And even if we don't feel it, we can proclaim that by what we do. Yeah.
Can we dive into that a little bit more? Just this idea of, Christmas, God with us, Emmanuel. Advent, there's over 400 years of silence leading up to the coming of Christ, where God's people didn't hear from God. And there was a whole lot of oppression and suffering of God's people. And it almost feels like a throwback to them being in Egypt, and they're crying out and they're wanting to hear from God. And then God hears their cry, as it says in Exodus, right? He hears their cry and he sends the better Moses, the greater Moses, Jesus, in the form of a baby. And that would seem that it would be this dawning of this new era, which it was, spiritually speaking, right? But it seemed to everyone there who were waiting for the Messiah that this was this dawning of this new era, that now is when the joy comes, but Jesus came as a suffering servant. And so Emmanuel, God with us, has a lot of layers of meaning there that really help us through the middle of our suffering. Can you dive into that a little bit and just talk about why is this Christmas season so important to help us remember that God is not just walking with us in our suffering, but he's experienced it as well.
Yeah. Well, and you said it. I mean, he became one of us. Like, everything that we have experienced, he is intimately acquainted with. I mean, he's carried our griefs, he's borne our sorrows, he knows our frame because he has inhabited it. And that to me just really dignifies our sufferings, because as you've already mentioned, like, we know him in the fellowship of his sufferings, but also in the power of his resurrection.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. And also, like, God, he never shows up the way we expect him to. Like, he does not confine himself to our expectations or even our craziest dreams. He's always going to surpass that. And, but never the way we think he's going to. But again, another layer of that is that Jesus is what God looks like. Like, when God chose to reveal himself in human form, like, that's who he is. He's weeping at the tomb of Lazarus, not because he didn't know that Lazarus was going to be resurrected on the last day, but because he entered into their pain. He knew.
Yeah. It's so comforting to me to know that Jesus understands everything that we've gone through, that we, as Hebrews says, serve a high priest who can empathize with us. And it's, there's often a lie that we believe from the enemy that says nobody else can understand what you're going through. You're alone in this. And Christmas can magnify that.
Absolutely.
Right? There can be all these feelings of not belonging or being alone. And obviously the reality of people's families and whatever nature they are, that, whatever status your family is in at that particular season can magnify that. And so here we have this promise that Jesus completely understands everything that we've gone through. And Lanier, I've I've shared this on the podcast before, but I've tested that with God. I'm like, Jesus, you can't understand what it's like to lose a wife. You have no idea what that's like. So don't tell me you can. And I felt like Jesus, as a big brother, put his arm around me and said, Davey, I know exactly what it's like to lose a bride. I know exactly what that's like. And I have been on a rescue mission since the beginning of time, since Adam and Eve ultimately swapped that truth for a lie and sin stole my bride. But on a rescue mission to take back the bride. And I did that with the cross, an empty tomb. I purchased back the bride. And now I'm calling you to restore the bride into what it was meant to be all along. Yeah. And it's like, oh, you do understand. You do understand. And there's just such a beautiful thing when we actually wrestle with God and we begin to peel back those layers to see the character and the humanity of Jesus and go, man, we do have a high priest that can empathize. He's gone through every temptation, every trial that we have.
Yeah. And I think that the operative thing in my life has been complaining to God and not about God. Just really like he invites that. He wants us to wrestle with him, and sometimes it can be easier, and this is just kind of painting with a broad brush, but I think it can be easier culturally to just say, oh, God doesn't exist. There's no way that God could be, like that, or that, loving God would let these things happen. It is much harder and more courageous to engage with those realities and to, like Jacob went to the mat, it's, and came up limping, but that's, sometimes that's what it takes.
He also came out with a blessing.
Yes, exactly.
So it's kind of a lesson, what we talked about earlier. If you want the blessing, you're going to have to also bear the limp. Yeah. That's Wow. Practically speaking, I know you were talking about how important it is to hold on to traditions that, and I love the way you said it, something to the effect of really carrying your story through into the next generation. But I'm kind of summarizing my own words there, but that's what I heard as you were saying that. And I remember after losing my wife, there were so many traditions that I was like, I really want to hold on to this. And then there were other parts where I said, okay, there's something new that we need to instate as a family, as a new family or new traditions. Can you talk to me about through your own personal wrestling, or just how you would advise people in terms of their decision making in hanging on to the old, starting new, letting go of the old? Of course, there's no black and white formula for that, but maybe how would you guide somebody through that?
So you're right. There is no formula for it, but I would say, hold them loosely, but hold them like you would a little baby bird, like in the sense that we have to protect them, but not smother them. Because essentially traditions are organic things. They are evidence of the life of a family. They are not the life of the family. Our traditions serve our relationships, not the other way around. And it's very easy, like when something has been meaningful over years and years and years, and to kind of keep trying to make it keep its shape. But the reality is life grows, changes shape. And so, the people don't serve the tradition. The tradition serves the relationships. And I like to see it as
that's good.
That the tradition is a container for the thing that is most precious, but it's not the thing. And the thing that it contains is our relationships. And just from personal experience, we haven't even gone into this. I do talk about it a good bit in the book, but in 2017, my husband, and I'll make this brief, but my husband and I suffered a house fire, which was kind of our worst nightmare in our 1850s farmhouse. And thank God the house did not burn down. And I mean that with all reverence,
wow.
Another moment and it would have burned to the ground. But through the mercy of God, our home was spared, but we ended up having to take about over a third of it back to the studs. We had to move out for a year. we ended up living in a camper in the backyard because we needed to be on site, while our home was being restored. And to care for our animals and everything. But anyway, one of the things that was hardest to me about that journey was Christmas, because even though we were in the midst of this like miracle of restoration and things were going more quickly than really they ought to have been, in terms of, getting us back in our home in a timely manner. Christmas was just so hard because it's my favorite time of year. And there were so many things that I missed. And the thing that I miss the most, every year, and for the last 25 years, my husband and I have hosted this brunch on Christmas Eve. And it's a tradition that we carried forward from his parents, who would host this brunch, in this home. And we would invite, it was, Philip's parents' best friends and their family. And now everybody's, married and has kids and, grandkids and like that. It's a huge group. But we've been hosting it for years. It's our favorite thing. I have all these traditions, games for the kids, just different foods that I always make. And it's always the same. It's always, everybody brings the same food. The kids come in asking for the same things. Like it's, everybody gets really dressed up. It's very special. I bring out all my best stuff. Well, the year that we were in the camper, of course, that was the thing I missed the most. And it didn't even occur to me that it could take a different shape until the day after Christmas, when one of my friends called and said, "Hey, I don't want to bother you, but our kids really miss coming to your place for Christmas. Could we just come and let them play in the yard?" And I was like, oh, like it wasn't all the trappings that the kids cared about. It was being together. I was like, thank you, children, for, out of the mouth of babes.
Yep. They reminded you of what this was all about, really.
This is what it's all about. And so they came and played in the yard and threw the football and played with the dogs. And I went to the grocery store and got some little sugar cookies because it was the day after Christmas. And of course, all the Christmas cookies were gone. But, it was just such a witness to me, like what it's all about. And to just let your traditions hold your relationships and let them grow and stretch and change and sometimes even be set aside. But to always prioritize the people that before.
So good. Wow. How would you, maybe one more question before we close, because I know a lot of people are listening to this or they're watching this and they have someone in their life who is walking through significant grief right now, or someone in their life where Christmas is, maybe they're experiencing personally, this has been a great season. We're on one of those mountaintops in life right now, but they're looking around and some of their friends or family members are really going through a hard time. How would you advise them to walk with those who are hurting?
That's a great question. And I think the first thing I would say is ask God to show you. One of the most poignant experiences of that I have ever had was that same Christmas that we were in the camper. I talk about this a lot in my book, but red roses are a very powerful and very personal symbol to me of God's redemptive work in my life. And, just the picture of the rose blossoming in the wilderness from Isaiah. And that Christmas, one of my friends, states far away, she was in Texas, and just kept praying like, Lord, how do I show up for Lanier this Christmas? What can I send her? What can I do? I'm so far away. And one day I came back to the house. It was total construction zone. It was just mess. I put a wreath on the door and somebody had thrown it on a pile of debris. And I came in the house and I saw this box on top of a pile of what had used to be my front hall. And I knew immediately what it was. And I knew who had sent it. And I ran back to the camper with it. And I sat on the floor weeping over this box of long stem red roses. And God had just dropped that idea into her head. She knew that it would mean a lot to me. She had no idea how seen that would make me feel. Wow. And I think it can be so personal. But I just felt like Jesus sent me those roses, and he was, I see you, even in this place, there's beauty.
Yeah.
And so I share that little story just to say, you don't have to say anything. I think just the most gentle acknowledgement, maybe the invitation, maybe hey, you know what? This is a hard season. Is there any way that I can just be with you? Sometimes that's the right thing. But I just wouldn't put too much pressure on yourself, because God is endlessly creative, and he really does show us how to be there for each other.
Wow. Lanier, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for spending time with us and really sharing your heart, sharing your story, opening up your home to us. I felt like when we were talking about the lunch, the dinner right there, I was like, man, I feel like I'm in your home right now. I can just like picture myself being in this like farm home. And oh man, it's so amazing. So I'm so glad. Are you guys doing that tradition now again?
We are. Yes. Okay, it's all back full steam. So. Good. But my heart towards it is a little different. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, if you guys are watching this, you're listening to this, I want to make sure that this Christmas season you guys pick up Glad and Golden Hours. The subtitle, Companion for Advent and Christmastide. And I'm telling you, I do think that it will really help you whether you're walking through something difficult right now, or whether maybe you're just as a family trying to figure out what kinds of traditions should we start together? What should we carry through? What should we, as you said, what do we need to hold in our hands like a little baby bird, and hold it loosely and protect it at the same time? And I think this is just going to be a really beautiful resource as you are on your journey, whatever your journey looks like right now. Again, it's beautifully illustrated by Lanier's friend and I guess co-contributor to this project. And it's part memoir, part cookbook, part liturgical guide. So you're going to be able to have something for the entire family within this. Lanier, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our community before we close?
Well, I would just like to say, one of my favorite scenes from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is when the White Witch comes across the animals celebrating Christmas feasting because they've had a visit from Father Christmas, which was completely unauthorized in her frozen reign. And she was so angry that she turned them all to stone. But remember, the reason she was angry was because Aslan was on the move. The snow was melting. The evidence of his presence was everywhere. And so I would just say that Aslan is on the move. The kingdom of God is in our midst. So don't lose heart.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for spending time with us. Thanks for sharing with us. We'll put a link for Glad and Golden Hours so you guys can access that very easily. And we'll make sure that you guys also have links to connect with Lanier on our website, on Instagram, Facebook. But again, this has just been an honor. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you. Absolute joy for me. So
thanks for joining us for today's episode of the Nothing is Wasted podcast. We hope you enjoyed our conversation and found it as encouraging and insightful as we did. Now, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen, and leave us a rating and review. Your feedback helps us to connect to those who need these stories of hope and healing most, and to reach more listeners just like you. Also, subscribe to our Nothing is Wasted Ministries YouTube channel. Now be sure to stay connected with us on social media. You can follow us at Nothing is Wasted Ministries. Follow me at Davey Blackburn. We'd love to interact with you, so be sure to stop by and let us know how these conversations are impacting you and your story. And if you want to learn more about all the incredible resources we have available to help you navigate whatever valley you're walking through, visit our website at nothingiswasted.com. If you're ready to get started in your journey towards healing and finding purpose in your pain, we'd love to help. Simply go to nothingiswasted.com/start here for your next step. We want to thank our guests, and we want to thank you, our Nothing is Wasted community, for tuning in regularly. Remember, no matter what challenges you face, whatever pain you are walking through, nothing is wasted. We'll see you next time for another incredible conversation here on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. But before you go, check out this short clip from our next episode. Thanks for joining us, friends.
And I think forgiveness is not a one-time thing that you say a prayer and you say, oh, I've forgiven them. I think it's a daily surrender of processing that and turning them over to the Lord and saying what they did was wrong, but ultimately justice is in God's hands. And I have gotten to a place in my heart where I want justice on earth, but I know that it won't be true justice as God would have it. But my pastor said something that was very helpful to me. And he said, Ashley, justice will either happen at judgment or at the cross for this man. And I have gotten to the place in my grief and forgiveness journey with this person and the passenger who was also responsible. I have gotten to a place where I truly want them to repent and believe in Jesus. And I want this man to one day meet my dad in heaven.